Wait, Lindsay, we might not be able to hear you. You're mute.
There we go. All right, try that again. I said, thank you for joining us today. I know that everyone has a lot going on right now. This year has been a roller coaster, to say the least. I appreciate the time today because I know that the census is not top of mind for so many of us right now. It is for me and it is for Lauren, but that's because our job is to make sure that the census works for our agencies. We're going to talk a little bit about the background of the census today, why it matters to community action, what you can do to help this process, and I'm going to go through some messaging. And I'm going to pepper the whole presentation with COVID-19 because it's affecting everything, but then we'll have a specific time at the end to talk about the pandemic and how it's impacting the census and how we can continue to do this crucial part of our American democracy under these quarantine conditions, et cetera. So I'm just going to dive in because I want to make sure we have lots of time for question and answers. The Constitution actually is where the census begins. It is in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution. So it's pretty important. Our founding fathers thought that this was the basic building block of our democracy. They devised a way that every 10 years we would count the entire population of our country, knowing that it would grow and that our population numbers would increase. And they did that because they wanted to be able to fairly allocate debt and resources to our communities. So every 10 years, and we have been doing this since 1790, as Americans and people living in America, not just people who are citizens, we count the population of our country. And we do include everyone. So if you are an undocumented immigrant, you get counted if you live here. If you are a foreign exchange student, you live here. If you are a foreign-born national visiting your family and you're going to be here for 6 months and you're here on April 1st, we count you. And we do that in part because no matter how many people are citizens or non-citizens, you still have a community of all of you. So if there are 10,000 people in a town and 500 of them are not American citizens, you still have 10,000 people in that town, 10,000 people on the roads, 10,000 people with, including children who may be a different status than their parents who are attending public schools. So you still need those resources of those 10,000 people, which is why we count everyone in this country. Back in the day, they did this in part because they needed a way to spread out the debt from the Revolutionary War. We don't necessarily do it that way anymore. People all over the country, people pay taxes, and that's what funds our country. But the resources that we send to our states are all based in this process. There's been a lot of question about the questions. So these are the 10 questions that are on that census form, and I'm hoping that some of you have by now, all of you should have received an invitation to fill out your census form. Based on the numbers, about a quarter of you have already, so thank you. If you haven't, these are the questions that you will be asked. So age, they're going to ask year and date of birth, mostly because they don't trust people's math. They're going to ask Hispanic origin, and they ask race, which are two separate questions the roots of that are in the Voter Rights Act and getting it wrong, but civic rights legislation. So they do ask both of those questions. What's been tripping people up is the race question will ask you your race. So I would obviously say white, but then it asks for origin. And what they're looking for is that my ancestors came from Germany and from England. So I would put Germany and England down. They're asking everybody to identify some of the countries of origin because they're looking for a broader depth of the American population. That's all it is. Some people have been putting American or USA. That's not what they're asking. It is not a citizenship question. They're asking for country of origin for your ancestors. They're going to ask relationship. They assume that for the most part, person one is the person filling out the form. You usually start with yourself. But either way, if you have a matriarch in the family and you're her daughter, So you put her first. Then they're going to ask how everyone in that household is related, in part because they want to know what American daily life looks like. A lot of this is historical fact and record, which is cool. When these forms are released in 72 years, genealogists are really excited for 2022 because that's when the forms from 1950 will be released. So for me, I'll be able to see my grandfather's handwriting as he put my mother and my aunt down on the form as with my grandmother, but not my uncle. So that stuff is really cool. Just to see how the modern day family is made up and households are made up. They will also ask gender, male and female. There was some discussion about adding a non-binary or transgender option. That did not make it to the 2020 census. It may or may not make it to the 2030 census. They're going to ask tenure, owner, renter. How is this house? Is it rented? Is it owned? Is it a mobile home? They want to know what kind of a domicile you live in. And that's pretty much it. There are a few operational questions, and those are meant to get at making sure you don't forget anybody that should be on your form, and making sure that you didn't include anyone who shouldn't be on your form. These questions are relevant in two major categories right now, especially with the pandemic. The first way is children. 0 to 4 are the most commonly missed people in America, aged 0 to 4. We missed 2 million children in 2010, and we've been working really hard to eradicate that undercount because often parents will put themselves on the form but not include their children. So if you ask how many people lived here on April 1st, and you've put 2 people on your form, yourself and your husband, but you have 2 kids and you didn't put your kids there, they're hoping they'll catch you in this question, and then they can follow up and say, hey, who are those other 2 children or other 2 people, and you can add your kids. They're also looking for college students, and this is actually a really big deal because so many schools have shut down and so many kids have gone home. Kids who live off campus are counted just like every other household in the country. So if you have a college-age child who lives off campus at their university or college, and they came back home because classes were canceled, so they're staying with you again, the questions ask if that person lives elsewhere part-time of the year because they're looking for those college kids. It is actually very crucial that those children get counted at their schools, at their college campuses, not at home. And I know that a lot of us want our resources to come home, but those college towns will collapse without that support. So it's a COVID-19 issue for sure. And finally, they're going to ask telephone number, name of the person filling out the census. So if they have some questions, they can reach out to you. And that is actually really important with the pandemic as well, because we're trying to reduce the number of face-to-face interactions we need to have in the coming months. The census will not ask for a variety of things as well. That includes social security numbers, any bank credit card information. They are not looking for your Wells Fargo account number. If they are, it's a scam. They're not asking citizenship status. There is no question, which is why I went through race as intensely as I did in the last slide. They're not asking for political affiliation. They're not asking who you support in the presidential election. They are not asking for money, period, full stop. They're not asking for donations, and they are not asking for household income numbers. So these things are all not on the census. Citizenship status is the biggest question of all of these. And our research shows that the best way to tell people that the citizenship question is not on the survey is to include it in a string of things that are not asked. If you highlight it as just, I mean, if somebody says, is there a citizenship question, you can say no, but then I would also say they're not asking for social security numbers, they're not asking for bank or credit card information, they're not asking citizenship status or anything political. It's best to couch it and to put it into a string of things, because if you highlight the fact that there is no citizenship question, it raises alarm bells for folks, and they don't trust it as much as in a list of things. So a little survey nerdery for you. Okay, once we do this count, what do we do with that information? The biggest thing we do is, well, there are 2 things. The biggest 2 things, the first one is apportionment. That means that we take all the people who live in the country, we add up everybody, and we divide that number by 435 because that is the number of members of the House of Representatives that serve in the U.S. Congress. And then they divide up those 435 people by states. So there are a few states that get an automatic representative, even though they don't necessarily hit that threshold. The current threshold is around 720,000 people. We believe the new threshold will be about 810,000 people. Wyoming does not hit that standard. North Dakota does not hit that standard. Vermont does not hit that standard. But the Founding Fathers all allocated one state at least one representative, regardless of their population, because they thought that that was the right thing to do to make sure that all the states had representation. Then they divide up everybody else based on their population. So this year we're looking at Texas possibly gaining two or three seats. California might gain a seat. They might stay the same. We're not entirely sure. Arizona stands to gain a seat or two. Florida stands to gain a seat or two. Louisiana might gain a seat. I'm not sure they're going to do the count well enough, but they could. They have the population. And then we have states that are terrified they're going to lose a congressional seat. Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Alabama. Pennsylvania last time around had 19 congressional seats in 2010. The census, they didn't lose population, they just didn't grow as fast as other places did. And so when they did the reallocation, they only had enough population to garner 18 seats. And so then they did the next thing that we'll all do next year, which is redistricting. So they had to take those 19 districts and consolidate them into 18 districts to make sure that that 19th district's population was absorbed into other districts and still had representation in Congress. So when I call this whole process the building block of democracy, I really mean it. This is how we get federal representation across the board. Everyone does still get 2 senators, but your House of Representatives are determined by the census. But it's not just federal. So these lines actually get redrawn for state and federal. State and House, state, federal. I'm going to screw this up again. State, House, and state Senate. There we go. House and Senate for the Maryland legislature. So those districts are also going to be redrawn, and those the populations, the lines are going to shift, and the number of representatives for your area. So if you have a population that's been booming for the past 10 years, you could gain another seat, and everything shifts in your state. And so the balance of power changes. Oklahoma, for example, is really petrified, and I know Maryland's got some rural areas as well that should be nervous about this whole process, because if rural folks aren't counted, then you could lose representation in the state house, and then you could not have a voice. And then the Maryland state legislature could be entirely urban, and there would be that rural voice. So it's important on a state level as well. The other big thing that this process does is allocate federal dollars to states, which is the most of the reason why we're interested. We want fair representation for all of our people and all of our customers and the people we serve, but we also really want the dollars that come along with a good count. And I've got a couple slides that'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. Census is also used to inform government planning. How do tribes, federal, state, local level entities determine where to put a firehouse, how to zone an area for commercial use or residential use, where do they put a hospital, how do they allocate road funding, all of those sorts of things. And organizational decisions, how do you decide where to put a headquarters? How did Amazon decide that they wanted to put something in Crystal City in Virginia? They looked at census data. We actually use census data as community action because we use it in our CNAs every 3 years. So if we don't have accurate census numbers, that's what we base all of our programs on. So if our numbers aren't accurate, then we stand to be doing the wrong programs to help our communities. So it's important for our administration as well. and what I stumbled on earlier, enforcing voter rights and civil rights legislation. If we don't know where people live who are impacted by those, then we can't enforce them, which is why they asked the Hispanic question and the race question. Okay, so key dates. Today is March 26th, so we are on that second line. Invitations started going out on March 12th. March 12th through March 20th, they sent the first round. I got our invitation at my house on March 12th. We got a follow-up on March 16th, so it's working. There are some people that haven't gotten their packets yet, and I'm going to get to that on the next slide. The invitations to respond are invitations to go online. So these are, they have unique codes. I had it right here. If people are interested, I can show you later. It has a unique code, and you go online to my2020census.gov. You type in your unique code, and you fill out the information for your household. They will not be sending the normal paper forms until the end of April, middle of April. This is a big change. This is the first census that is being conducted online. Every previous census has been paper only. The other thing that they've done this year is added phone lines. So there's always been a phone line where you can ask questions, but this year you can also fill out your form over the phone. And they have 13 different languages spoken on the phones, which it includes Spanish, English, Japanese, Vietnamese, TDD, hard of hearing. They have a variety of different languages, the 13 most popular languages spoken in the country. So they're making an attempt to make it accessible there. But the first couple of letters that everybody gets just pushes you to the phones and pushes you online until those paper questionnaires come out in April. April 1st is Census Day. So next Wednesday is Census Day. That is the day, no matter when you fill out your census form, if you filled it out the day you got it on March 12th, or if you fill it out on the very last day you possibly can on August 14th, you are thinking about your household on April 1st. It's a snapshot of America. So that's why I said if you have a foreign national relative, if you have your great uncle visiting from Spain for 6 months and he's here on April 1st, you include him because he's living with you for 6 months and he is there on April 1st. That's the key. April 1st is a way for us to make sure that we're not double counting folks and that we're not undercounting folks. Because if you fill it out whenever you get to the survey as that day, we don't get that clear snapshot because people move. People move and people scatter and people are born, people die. So by having this one day where people think back on, we get this snapshot of America. And I'm going to talk more about that when I talk about COVID. The paper questionnaires will be sent in the middle of April. They're going to be sending out final postcards, I think still in the end of April. This timeline has changed. I adapted this morning with the updates that I have for COVID-19. Right now, all of the enumeration processes that require face-to-face contact have been delayed, either a couple of weeks or a month, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. The biggest change to this whole timeline is that the non-response follow-up visits were supposed to start on May 4th. They're now starting on May 28th. And the second thing is that the last day to respond was supposed to be July 31st, and they have moved it to August 14th. I would be surprised, very surprised actually, if they move that date back. But if they do, I don't think they'll move it back any farther than September 1st. And that's because they need to tabulate things on the back end. So once everybody responds, they have a mess of data that needs to be cleaned and deduped. They're going to have a problem with those college kids because a lot of parents will include their kids on their college-age kids on their count, and so they're going to have to suss that out. And we have just the uncertainty right now. We've got a lot of households that are consolidating because people are losing their jobs right now and can't pay rent. So there's going to be a lot of messy data cleanup to have done on the back end, and they can't do, they need the time. They need September, October, November. to do that in order to get the records to the president in December as mandated by the Constitution. I did add a link here to show all of the timeline adjustments. So if you're curious, you can go and see what other parts. I'm going to talk about a couple other things that have changed in the last week or two. Okay, so this is something that has changed. 95% of households are supposed to receive their census invitation by mail. That's still true. 5% of households are receiving their census invitation when a Census Bureau employee drops that off. That has been delayed. I don't know when they're going to be doing that, but that was supposed to be rural districts. Anywhere there's a PO box that you rely on, PO boxes cannot receive census materials. So the Census Bureau's answer is to go around rural America and drop off packets on front porches. That process has been stalled indefinitely. It might pick back up in a month. I don't know. The tribal territories are also being shut down on that aspect. So they were supposed to, a lot of them were also supposed to receive their census invitations when a census taker dropped them off. And I know that there are some tribes that have said, we're going to handle that ourselves. We don't want Census Bureau employees on our land. And they were going to do that process. And I don't know if that's still happening. It goes case by case. But I'm now very worried that we are going to have even worse rural undercount and an even worse count of the tribal areas and tribal members than we were going to have anyway, which wasn't going to be good. So if anybody lives in areas that are affected by that, they might not receive invitations. They still need to fill out the census form. And the way to do that is to go online to my2020census.gov and do a non-ID response. So right below the box where you would put in your unique ID code that's been mailed to you, there's a link that says, forgive me, I don't know the exact wording, but it's something about filling out using your address or a non-ID response. That's what people need to do. And then less than 1% of households are going to be counted in person. They did a lot of this work already in Alaska, rural Alaska. There are places where people, tribes come and winter together, and then they go out, they're hunters and they're fishers. So the best time to catch them is January when they're not roads, but the pathways are not paved, they're frozen over, and they're accessible and the population is in one place. So they're still doing some of that face-to-face enumeration with social distancing, 6 feet of separation. It is a new world order. We are estimating that 40% of households will require in-person follow-up. Our jobs right now are to lower that number as much as we can to prevent the spread of COVID-19. My guess is that that number will probably go up to 45 or 50, and if we don't do anything about it. So we really have a lot of work ahead of us. This is going to be changing, but it's an idea. So CUNY, it's the City University of New York, they received quite a bit of funding to do mapping. And I'm going to show you what Maryland's map looks like right now. The map shows which areas get what invitations. Are they getting bilingual invitations? Some places are getting mail, paper ballots in the mail first. My aunt got one, and I haven't been able to dig into why her area was designated as that. It could just be that they have historical reference to know that through the American Community Survey, that people respond better in that area to paper forms. So there is another survey that the Census Bureau is doing right now, the American Community Survey. Some of the confusion with the forms and the questionnaire, that we're only doing 10 questions. It's just what some people might know as the short form. The long form is now an entirely separate survey called the American Community Survey. That happens on an annual basis, rolling basis. It's always going on. 1% of American households gets that survey every year. And each household will not get it more than once every 5 years, but there are 1% of households are confused right now because they think they filled out the census because they filled out the American Community Survey. They did not get the decennial census. So there are 2 surveys out there, which does confuse things. But that has given us 15 years of data on who reports to those paper forms and who goes online to fill out the American Community Survey. So some people were preemptively given paper forms. And again, this slide says having them dropped in rural areas because I didn't get a chance to entirely update all of it. That is changing, and I'm not sure when that's going to happen. But the maps are also key right now because they're showing response rates. So I pulled a couple examples to show everybody. If somebody doesn't get that invitation, I just want to reiterate, go online, fill out the forms, find the hotline number, call in, fill out your form over the phone. Not getting a form does not mean you're not invited to respond. It just means that something went awry and your paper invitations didn't arrive. All right, I'm going to try to speed things up because I've had to adjust some things and I want to make sure we have time for questions. The census is still hiring. They hire about 520,000 people. They have said that they have hit their hiring, like their recruitment goals. They do it backwards in some ways. They don't say we need to hire 100 people. They say we need 500 applications for those 100 people. So they have received enough applications to hit their goal numbers. We are worried that they're not going to be able to retain their workforce. There are a lot of people who are thinking if there's not going to be door-to-door enumeration starting in May, they have to look for other work. There are some people who are immunocompromised or are at high risk for COVID-19 complications, and so they have withdrawn their applications. So the Census Bureau is still hiring. The difficulty there is that they are no longer fingerprinting, and fingerprinting is a required part of the process to be onboarded. But we are still asking people to apply if you're interested in doing this work. There is remote work that can be done. There's office work that can be done. It is not all going out in the field and knocking on doors. But that's something we're watching, and it's an issue. And this number is probably wrong right now as well, but the average cost for counting a household pre-COVID-19 in 2020, it's estimated to be $107. In 1970, it was $16, and both of those numbers are in 2020 dollars. So the cost of counting a household has gone up significantly, but it's worth about $2,000 per person in federal funding to your community if you are counted and if there's an accurate count in your area. So if you miss 10 people, you've just missed $20,000, but it's not just for 1 year, it's for 10 years. So you've really lost $200,000 because it magnifies, because these are the counts we have for the next 10 years. The environment is difficult. I want to add a circle that says COVID-19 because that's a big problem right now. But part of our issue is that there's a massive distrust in government. The political climate is difficult at best, and the attempt to politicize the census through the citizenship question was detrimental. So we've got some serious distrust right now in the process. I had somebody today say, I just don't want to fill out the form, even though I know I need to. I just don't want the government asking me those questions. And that opinion is valid. I mean, I get it. I understand where it comes from. We have to push through that because we have to fill out these forms to make sure that our democracy works. But that's, the situation is there. We have an increasingly diverse population. We have a lot of migrants. We have a lot of people who come from places where they would never tell their government this information. So America's different. They came here for a reason, but they don't know the process. So that's an issue. Informal complex living arrangements account for a lot of undercounts. The friend who's couch surfing because they got evicted from their apartment and they need to get back on their feet, but they're staying with you for a while, they're living with you. They have nowhere else to call home. So they should be on your census form, even if they won't be there in a month or two. They have nowhere else. They live with you and they should be counted. We have a lot of issues with children undercounts, with grandparents caring for their grandchildren. They don't want to take away parental rights by claiming that kid on their form, but they need to because they are raising that child. They are the guardian. The kid lives with them. But that's how kids get missed. Or you've got divorced couples where the parents don't communicate and both assume that the other parent will count their children. I would rather both parents count those children than neither parent count those children. I would always rather have an overcount than an undercount because the Census Bureau will catch that and dedupe and take away the double count. They cannot make up information that they don't have. So whenever there's a doubt, I would always err on the side of over-reporting rather than under-reporting. I will also say that if you have already filled out your form and you realize that you left off the 3-month-old baby in your house, it's okay. You simply go to the website, my2020census.gov, and you fill out the survey again using the non-ID response. So you can't go back in and open it back up and make changes to the form that was submitted, but you can resubmit the form. And the current guidance that I'm hearing is that you do need to include everyone that is in that household. So if there are 5 members and you left off the 5th one, you do need to re-enter everyone that it is in your form, in your house, and to add that person. So that's shaky. I have heard previously that you just need to add yourself. And so I'm going to get clarification, but right now, to be safe, I would include everyone. So if you have college roommates and you're trying to fill out your form that was in the mail before you left the University of Maryland College campus, you go online and you need to put all 4 of your roommates on that form. To coordinate with your roommates is the way to do it, but I digress. We also have a mobile population, and I know people are quarantined right now and staying home, but we have a lot of people who are housing insecure, living in mobile homes or RVs, or living in motels. And the enumeration, it's called transitory location enumeration. That plan has been changed. They were supposed to do that enumeration Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week by sending pairs of enumerators out to places where homeless populations congregate and where they know, like Walmart parking lots where they know RVs are, and talking to motels and hotels around that day. Because that isn't an in-person activity, it has been pushed back. I think it's been pushed back a month right now, but I'm not entirely sure. They were talking about asking service providers, point of service, to do enumeration for homeless populations, and they have now changed that, and they have gone back to their original plan of having the Census Bureau do those counts, but in a month's time rather than next week. Because of COVID-19, which was smart. We were going to push back on that anyway because all of you are overwhelmed and overloaded. The last thing I need to do is ask you to also count homeless populations that are coming through for services. The constrained fiscal environment refers to the $15 billion that Congress has been fighting about. One half says we don't need to fund the census with the normal levels because everything's online now, so less paper to print, all that kind of stuff. On the other side says, well, technology isn't a perfect system, and it's a new way of doing things. So we're going to need to do even more than we did last time when people knew that they were going to get a paper form in the mail to educate and to advertise and the like. So there's been a big fight. Rapidly changing use of technology. Today is trying to break through COVID-19 news. That is all you see in your inbox, every email. The joke is that people I haven't ordered from in 15 years have suddenly told me about their COVID-19 policy. Because they're dredging up every single email in their universe, which is interesting. But it also is clutter that we have to break through. Okay, I said I was going to speed up and I haven't. These are the categories that the Census Bureau has designated as hard to count. So these populations are the ones that have the largest undercounts for the most part. Native Americans, low-income populations, young children, people of color, migrants, senior citizens, people with disabilities. It is a veritable who's who of community action. This is who we serve, which is why we're involved. We are still, this is a holdover slide, we are still inviting people to apply for the census. They have full-time jobs, they have part-time jobs. We'll send this PowerPoint around, and if you're interested, you can follow up with me for sure. I can talk a lot more about it. And you can also see where they're hiring through the links in this slide. Okay, I touched on this a little bit. The hard to count populations come through our doors every day, or we have some contact with them in some way, shape, or form today. That's why we're involved. We are trusted messengers. If somebody comes to a community action agency, they are down on their luck, or they are they need help. They're at their wit's end and they need help. They come to us, we help them make ends meet. So they trust us with everything. And it's an easy thing for us to do to say that the census is safe, easy, and important, and to make that touch so they know that that this is something that they need to do. And we're doing it because we care about funding our programs. If our counts are off and we get less LIHEAP money because of it, then we can help fewer people with that service. Just to drive home the dollar point, CSBG is affected by census counts, as is LIHEAP and Head Start. Substance abuse block grants, healthcare centers, all of these things are all impacted in some way, shape, or form by census numbers somewhere in those formulas. So that's why this is such a crucial thing for community action. All right, we've got a problem, right? So we need to do this count. We have lots of barriers in our way. What are we doing? The Census Bureau is our partner. We have partnered with them and we get information from them. My eyes are pretty much glued to their press release page every day these days to see what's changing and what's happening. In theory, they have partnership specialists across the country. They have broken the country into these 6 regions. You folks are in the Philadelphia region. And Fernando Armstrong is the regional director there. In theory, you can email philadelphia.regional.office@census.gov and find somebody who's working in your area. A lot of these people are working remotely these days, so you can still do this. We've been having some trouble with finding the regional offices aren't answering the phones, they're not responding to emails. But it is not a bad idea for anyone to reach out to the partnership specialist to find out what's happening in your area. If they aren't answering, the second way to go about doing this is to find the local complete count committee. And some of you may be on a complete count committee, or maybe you have started your own complete count committee, which is awesome and incredible, and I thank you for that. But these are, it depends on the geography. Sometimes they're county-based, sometimes they're city-based. So I'm sure that Baltimore has a complete count committee. But it also could be that across the Bay Bridge, they also have 5 or 6 complete count committees based on county. I don't know. I didn't go and check, but I do know that they're out there. And this website has links to the people who are heading up those efforts. So you can zoom in on the map and see who is in your area. And then you have a phone number, a name, and an email address that you can contact and say, hey, what's going on? How are we changing things in light of COVID-19? How can we be helpful? These are like tripartite boards in a lot of ways. There is a statewide complete count committee where all of the statewide partners have come together, which includes the state government and local representatives, statewide nonprofits and statewide businesses, all coming together to figure out how to do a count. But then the local complete count committees, I feel, are more powerful in a lot of ways because they're doing on the ground efforts. These are the maps that I promised. This is the CUNY map. This is the map of Maryland today, and these are response rates. So you can see where we're doing a little bit better. The lighter shade areas are responding a little bit more. I'm not surprised to see Silver Spring is doing a little bit better than, say, Baltimore. All around the board, the national average is about 27% have responded. But these maps will actually show you what the 2010 rate was. Let's see if I did this. Yeah, so in 2010, the final self-response was 69.5. I would much rather it be closer to 80. There's a real opportunity for Maryland to get a lot more federal funding if we can up these count numbers. Right now, Maryland's sitting at 26.7% response rate, which is on average. I mean, that's about where we are as a nation. But the Census Hard to Count maps, which is Census Hard to Count Maps 2020.us, you can go and see how your county, your census tract, your street, more or less, and it's not quite that granular, they protect privacy, but you can see how your area is doing and how you're responding to see how much effort we need to put into your area. We are also part of a Census Counts, it's called the Census Counts 2020 Coalition. These are all of the other members of that coalition. It is a wide net of American everybody. They tried to pick every ethnicity, every special interest group they could think of to make sure that we were making inroads into all these populations. So the anti-poverty stuff is spearheaded by us and the Coalition on Human Needs. But then you have like the National Urban League and Color of Change and the AARP, I'm sorry, the NCAA and NAACP. They're all corralling and working for the Black Census Count. This is actually Black Census Week. Next week will be the Asian Pacific American Islander Census Count Week. So as a community, we're all lifting up our partners and doing special call outs for special weeks to make sure we're trying to hit every population. The LAO is the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, and they've done a lot of in-language work with Spanish. And they've been really spearheading our Spanish language and Hispanic outreach efforts. The National Congress of American Indians has been corralling the tribes and trying to make sure that they have an impact there. Arab American Institute, Asian Americans Advancing Social Justice are handling Asian American and Arab American needs. It's an important coalition. It gives us a lot of resources, and it's nice to be able to amplify our messages across many platforms. You can find where our Census Counts Coalition members are active and what they're doing in your area if you want to partner with somebody. We also do encourage you to reach out to those partnership specialists if you're just starting out with census work to see where we are and what is happening. Our job is to educate and increase awareness. The first 6 months we did an education tour. They sent us out to train on the census, the basics, who, what, where, etc. We're trying to make it easy for all of you to engage and to talk to your customers about the census. COVID-19 makes that far more difficult, and we're going to come out with some recommendations in the next few days about how you can do a lot of this work digitally. But our goal is to make this easy for you and to make it seamless. Our website has a lot of information. Lauren, who is our host today, has redesigned it lately to have COVID-19 information up front. So there's a response link so you can find the link easily and the hotline numbers so you can respond yourself, but also all the changes that have been happening with COVID-19 can be found on our website, as well as we have a blog that has lots of information about awkward questions and answers, like who do I actually include on my form? Do I include this person? That kind of a thing. We also have a complete count committee. I love the idea so much. We created one for community action. We have about 450 members. I would love to hit 1,000 because I want one in every agency that's paying attention to the census, because it's such a crucial part of our operations, even just to make sure that we have accurate numbers for CNAs, but also to make sure that we get our funding. So if your agency does not have somebody on that complete count committee yet, you can sign up. You can shoot me an email or Lauren, or you can sign up on our website. We have a Moodle Academy, and this is actually something Moodle overall is an online learning system that the partnership has engaged. Our learning communities has several courses online as well. If you have staff right now that's working remotely and you don't have stuff for them to do, so you can pay them, we had a working group meeting yesterday where it was suggested that people can be trained on our Moodle platform. So we're going to be looking as an agency, as an organization, how we can provide more training materials. So this might be a great chance for people to brush up on some things, but we also have census stuff. So in less than 2 hours, you can be census certified. So it's basics, it's frequently asked questions, it's how to walk somebody through the form and make sure that they are responding accurately and appropriately, and helping them feel comfortable with the security of the system and how it's safe to enter all this information about your family, etc. So we encourage everyone, it's free for any community action member. So if you're a part of our network, you can access this for free at moodle.communityactionpartnership.com. The ask that we have for all of you is to talk about the census whenever you have contact with a customer. We know that there are agencies that are planning Census Day, activities, pizza parties, that kind of a thing. And you can bribe people to fill out the census for sure. You cannot bribe people to vote, but you can bribe them to do the census. One way to do that before COVID-19 would be, for example, having a terminal in your lobby where if people fill out the census form, they get a ticket and enter into a pizza party raffle or something like that. You can certainly do that. But if you don't have time or energy, and you might not for sure, the thing we want you to do the most is to put it in your signature file for every email you send a customer. Mention it to folks. Say, hey, did you get your census form? Did you fill that out? It's really important for us that you fill that out and make sure that you include everyone in your household, because it funds the programs that we provide for you here. That kind of a thing is really important, and having that touch is really important. So we're asking you to make sure that you know enough information to have a conversation, a short conversation with somebody about the importance of doing the census. and you probably have picked up most of that knowledge by listening to me for the last 45 minutes. But we do have videos, training videos, and those sorts of things. We also have handouts. So we have flyers and buttons and posters and fact sheets, and we're sending them to you for free. So I just placed an order. I can add anyone from Maryland today that is interested in materials. You can shoot me an email, and we can get that done if we do it in the next hour and a half or so, because those are starting to go out. And if you need something that we haven't thought of, please ask us. Okay. I'm going to try to speed up a little bit again. So we're asking you to just touch base with your folks and tell them that this is happening. We have some training videos. The top left corner is 7 minutes. The other two are shorter. They're all under 2 minutes, but they address individual topics rather than a bunch of topics. One about the census being easy and convenient, which is our main message right now because we need people to self-respond. I'm not going to go through all of these right now, but I'm going to encourage you to read them on your own. And I'm going to flip through the slides because I want to have questions. Our partners did a lot of messaging research. They did surveys, they did focus groups to figure out how to convince some of these really hard to count populations to convince the census, to complete the census. Overall, the best tested message was filling out the census helps your community and brings funding to your community. How you do that is in a variety of ways, changes based on your demographic. But they did kids because kids are this anomaly. Kids don't actually fill out the form themselves. They are counted by their parents or their guardians. And so they did research on why we missed 2 million kids last year. And so for kids, we have to tell them that counting everyone is really important. Everyone in our households, that their babies count. People leave off 3-month-olds. It's crazy. And that funding is used for schools and for childcare, transportation and housing, all of the programs that they use. And if you miss a kid, you don't just miss that kid for a year, you skip their childhood. So that child or your community has less funding for that entire child's childhood. African Americans, we're targeting millennials when it comes to African Americans. Older African Americans tend to fill out the census and understand the importance. But Black millennials think that the government has other ways to get the information. They do, which is how we know we have these undercounts. But it's kind of like going to the voting booth. If you don't go to the voting booth, your opinion doesn't matter. If you don't fill out the census form, it doesn't matter. You have to fill out that form. That's how the process works. So they could know that you exist, but if you don't fill out your form, you don't get the funding and you don't get the political representation. The best thing we can do to catch these African-American millennials is to talk about specific programs, specifically Medicaid and food stamps. If you mention those programs, they're more likely to fill out the form. But you have to tell them that it impacts their community, and then they're far more likely to listen. Hispanics, we got to get past that fear about citizenship question, which again is not on the form, but there's a lot of fear mongering. A lot of people who think that they're going to get deported if they fill out the form, or their family members, their loved ones, or somebody who's staying with them can get deported. A, there's no citizenship question. B, the census is prohibited by law from sharing any personal private information they collect with any other agency. These forms are kept private for 72 years. So that's, 1950, what has happened in the last 72 years, right? The landlord my grandfather had in 1950 is dead. So even if they had more people than they should have in that household, they couldn't get in trouble anymore because the landlord's dead. It doesn't matter anymore. That's one of the safety precautions. They also have something called Title 13, which is an oath that each member of the Census Bureau workforce pledges on their first day. That says that if they don't protect privacy and they reveal private information ever, not just while they're employed by the Census Bureau, but ever, they can be jailed up to 5 years and fined up to $250,000. So there's protections out there that make this process completely safe. They do get information from HHS and from HUD and from Homeland Security, and the IRS, and they use that to check records. So somebody can't claim 15 extra kids in their household to get extra funding. They will compare that with their IRS records and see that they only claim 2 children on their earned income tax credit. So there are checks and balances in place, but if you don't fill out the form, you don't count, and you might as well just be erased. talking to Hispanic communities overall, saying something is better than nothing. So mentioning the census really moves that needle. Asian Americans, fair share of resources and government, key to equality, all of the same issues. That their overarching messages hit the same way. They need to get their fair share of resources. My community needs those resources, specifically the school systems. It's the key to equality, all of that sort of thing. Native Americans, erasure is a big issue. Don't let them erase us. We need to stand up and be counted. They have no reason to trust the American government, but they also need to make sure that their numbers are known. That was the best message there. Okay, so I have talked a little bit about coronavirus. I'm going to flip through 2 questions and open it up because we only have about 7 minutes. I'm sorry, there's just too much information. I'm going to leave my email address and Lauren's email address. Lil Dupree is also on our team, and we have Jim Masters and Alan Stansberry as subject matter experts. Any of us can answer questions. Lauren and I are probably the most up to date on the COVID-19 stuff right now. And with that, I'm going to open it up. Do we have any questions?
No questions yet, but Clint Cottom had mentioned that there's a rural county in Utah that only uses PO boxes. So they have some of the worst response rates because the packet drop-offs are being delayed. So, yeah.
Yes. I didn't realize that. Hi, Clint. I didn't realize you were on today. That's an issue. Yeah, the rural stuff is hard. So any of you who live in rural districts who are doing that rural outreach, please make sure you talk to your customers and encourage them to do it. If you're sitting at in a remote office right now and you're emailing clients and customers, please include something in your signature file that says, go online and do this, or give them the phone numbers. And we have all of that information readily available on our website, which is the Community Action Partnership /Census-2020. Surprise, no questions? There's no way I covered everything.
So we do have a question. How do we access that phone list to call to remind people of the census? Let's see.
I'm not sure I
quite
understand
the question. Yeah.
So we are calling folks, and in fact, well, so the Census Bureau overall does not call people. They try, I mean, they do, but they don't. They will not call you if you have not filled out a form already giving them your name and phone number. So if you get a call out of the blue, you haven't filled out your census yet, and somebody calls and says, I'm with the Census Bureau, that's probably a scam. We have seen scams. We have seen the latest scam is that people are saying that your the federal relief check for COVID-19 is tied to census participation. A, no, B, no, C, no. That's not true. It's not true at all. As much as I like a reason for people to fill out the census, none of that is true. So that, I mean, there are things like that that are happening, and we're seeing, we see misinformation a lot. If you have any questions or see anything that you're like, that doesn't seem right, ask me. Please just shoot me an email and ask me. And I will either know or I'll hunt it down for you. The Census Bureau is starting to move a little bit more into using phone numbers as provided by people on their forms, so they don't have to send people door to door. We're trying to limit exposure, right? So why would the federal government be knocking on doors? They are talking about how anyone who does go out to do enumeration will stand 6 feet away, but still it's daunting. So they might be doing follow-ups and quality assurance checks, because they do. Like I used to say that if you fill out your form, you're less likely to have a Census Bureau employees show up at your doorstep, which is true. It's for sure. But it used to be because then they didn't have to knock on your door and say, hey, you didn't fill out your census. And now it's more, they're trying to avoid that at all costs. And if they can do that by doing quality assurance checks and clarification checks over the phone using the phone number you provided, they will. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so we have one more question. If they receive the invitation in the mail, will they also get a physical one? Like a paper form?
It depends on whether or not they fill out the census early. If you get an invitation, I don't have mine here. If you get an invitation, and I've been keeping it on my desk so I can show people, you get an invitation to go online or go or be pushed to the phones, you'll get that and a follow-up letter and a follow-up postcard before you get a physical copy in the mail. They will send you a paper copy sometime in April if you do not fill out the form beforehand. And so, I mean, I'm torn. Like, I've been so excited to fill out the form, right? But I kind of want to see what happens. Like, I want to see when those, like, make sure those mailers are still coming. But I also want to fill out the form so the Census Bureau doesn't have to worry about me or my household anymore. And so I'm probably going to do it this weekend. But you will only get that paper form in the mail if you don't fill out the form online or over the phones before the cutoff date to mail those out. I also would like to save the federal government money of having to send me a paper form. But the first couple are invitations for most places. There are some places like my aunt who got a paper form in the mail originally. Like her first invitation said, go online, fill it out, you know, but she also got that paper form. And it must be because her area has a depressed response rate for phones or for online. Online is what they would know, actually. And that could be because they have low internet access. They don't have broadband. They have spotty internet. And so for rural households, the phone is really the best option. We just put together a rural flyer that talks about how census is important to the rural areas that has the phone numbers on the back. So if you still have weatherization teams going out, if you have transportation teams still driving people to doctor's appointments and the like, you can order those cards from us in the next couple of hours, and we'll send them out to you, and you can hand them out. If you're doing a light heat mailing for the summer cooling season, you can include our flyers in those mailings. Please let me know. What else do we have that's easily accessible? If you're doing food pantry drops, if you're doing congregate meal drop-off, you can include a census flyer with each meal you deliver, each bag of groceries that you pack. We're getting some stickers made up. So if any of that stuff is interesting, as you pair your operations back to emergency services and find ways to do all of your work without talking to people face-to-face as much as possible, if you have ways to contact folks and can include a flyer, please let us know. It is the top of the hour. I'm happy to stay on if people have more questions. And clearly my email address is here. Lauren, do we have anything else in the queue?
No, that's it.
Okay. Kaya, do you have anything that you would like to add? Okay, she's on mute. All right, well then we will end the recording. We will send the slides out and the recording of this, and when we have it available in a day or two, it usually takes. And in the meantime, the one thing I will say is that I know that everyone is focused on COVID-19 right now, as they should be. And so what we're doing as a staff is trying to figure out how to prepare everyone for 2 weeks from now. So I know Census Day is next week, and if anybody can do Census Day, like push, great, that's really great. But we know that you are all handling other crises right now. And so we're gonna make sure that you can catch back up mid-April when the new normal settles in just a little bit. If you can't do it next week and you're slammed. We do have until August 14th to count our communities. This is a marathon, not a sprint, and we know that, and we're here to help. And if you can't do it today and tomorrow, it's okay. We'll settle into the new normal, and then you can pick back up, and we'll be there to help you every step of the way. So I want to thank everyone for joining us, and please send us questions, comments, emails. We're here to help. Thanks, everyone.